Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you, and I must say it's been an absolute pleasure being back after somewhat 2 months on the airwaves of Salam Media, and particularly on tonight's show where we normally have a panel discussion Wednesday nights. It is with myself, Inayet Wadee, and I must say I'm very, very happy to be back. But clearly being out of media for 2 months and being in the political landscape has clearly been an eye-opener, and there are just far too many lessons being within the political landscape, and also in terms of the elections, and also a deeper insight as to how this entire political system works. So I've come back a lot wiser, but wonderful being with you, our listeners on the various platforms of Salam Media this evening. And the big talking point in South Africa will still remain for a while. We're talking about the government of national unity. And tonight we are going to be navigating through this uncharted territory, and also at the same time looking at the reality of government in South Africa, the reality of control in South Africa. And we've seen a lot being said, a lot being written. Will this government of national unity survive the full 5-year term? And particularly in the light of conflicting and opposing ideologies within government in more ways than one, from the economy to the inequality that exists in South Africa, the coming together of white monopoly capital, black monopoly capital, neoliberal policies. There's just so much conflict, and this is the reason why some are saying that the notion of a government of national unity in South Africa is a facade. Others are saying that it was carefully orchestrated. This is an illusion that was hatched in the corridors of power in London and in Washington, and also at the same time, the grand deception for the South African voter, and this is to appease the masses. Was the election just reduced to a mere formality? These are many, many questions that are being asked, and this is the reason why we've put together a panel of experts to discuss this very topic. And we have with us, and I know he'll be joining us shortly, Thabiso Twala, who is a former unionist. We've got Professor Rasigan Maharaj, Institute of Economic Research on Innovation, Phapano Phasha, Chair of Capit Research Institute, Yusuf Patel, a MUSA Council member, and Tahir Maepa will be joining us. He's with the Public Service and Commercial Union of South Africa. I see Thabiso has joined us as well. Yusuf Patel is on screen, and Professor Rasigan Maharaj, Phapano Phasha coming on as well. Okay, I see we've got 4 of our 5 panelists with us, and to all of you, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Welcome, salam.
Walaikum salam, greetings. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Right.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Phapano, we go with ladies first, and I know you've said a lot, you've written extensively since this government of national unity was formed. I've seen a number of your posts on social media. I've seen the letter that you've written to the women of the ANC. And as we talk about this government of national unity, uncharted territory, we don't know what we're going into, we don't know what to expect. And again, we have this the sentiment sometimes that is expressed that this is actually a facade. Now, I'd just like your thoughts, on the government of national unity, and I'll go through all the panelists just to get your initial thoughts, and thereafter we'll take the discussion further.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Wadee, and to the panelists and the listeners and viewers who are watching at home. I think one thing that I'd like to express, and I've been saying it many times when I come to this platform, is the reality that we are not well organized, especially many of us who are or who could consider themselves progressive. The reality, and we might shy away from it, is that ultimately it's Zionists who have actually won. And I state this because if you look at the elections, and in fact, if you look at all the institutions which have the power to define, the people who define this, who mainly fund these institutions, are mainly Zionists who put a lot of their money, besides the Americans, besides the British. The hard fact is that the Oppenheimer family and the Menels and others have put a lot of money in South African politics, and consistently we seem to forget that. We seem to forget that our elections and our democracy and everything else, and everything else, as I said, that has the power to define, it has been bought. So these are realities that we need to come to terms with, and we can sit and mourn. But as I initially said, all of us who see ourselves as the left progressive, we need to just come to terms that we are not actually doing enough to contest and confront the status quo. So what you're seeing now, we might call it a facade, but what you're seeing is a group of people who are well organized, who are well funded, and who are well disciplined. And until we also decide that we need to contest the establishment at an equal front, then I think we will continuously have these discussions where we mourn, where we analyze. And I'm hoping that in the final analysis, when we're done here, what will be key is what needs to be done. What do we actually have to do in order for us to do things differently? And it might also be that we have an idea of what needs to be done, but we actually don't know how to do it. So I think that's where I'll start, and then as the panelists and as the discussions go along, I'll make further input. But I think we could do better, and the large aspect of it is being able to mobilize the way that these guys have been mobilizing. Because what is happening is not even new. They've been doing this for centuries. These guys have perfected the art of politics, and we are far behind. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Phapano. And let's bring in Professor Rasigan Maharaj. Now, Prof, just your take against what Phapano has been saying and talking about this notion of the government of national unity. I alluded to this, talking about a government of conflicting ideologies, opposing ideologies, and also, when one looks at the manifestos of many of these parties now, they've all come together. And just your thoughts, because there are skeptics that are saying that this is a government that will not last the full 5-year term.
So thanks very much, Inayet, and also the comrades that are participating in this panel itself. Yeah. So what the comrade Phasha has raised, I think, is important for us to recognize, but also, if you don't mind, for us to take a little step back and recognize where we are in a kind of historical process as well. It's important for us noting that we are within a global capitalist system itself. Insofar as South Africa is one of the members of this world system, the function of a government in all capitalist society is to act as the executive committee of the ruling class. And as such, we should not be surprised in terms of what we are seeing being performed in front of us. So what I meant by taking that step just a little bit back is to also remember where we've come from. So the legacies of colonialism, of imperialism, of racial capitalism, of apartheid itself was brought to its end by the peoples of South Africa itself. So in 1994, we embark on a process where the object was to enhance or create a democratic society. There were simple tasks, so I'm not making it overcomplicated in yet. So I'll just reduce it to basically two main tasks. First one was to recognize and redress the legacies of apartheid itself, which stem from racial capitalism as its base. The second part was to advance a reconstruction and development program for all on the basis of enhanced and expanded productive capacities, capabilities, and competences. that would allow us to advance beyond what racial capitalism offered us. 3 decades later, we confronted, as you correctly point out, to this version of what's been called a government of national unity. I think we need to be posing questions about governance under our current circumstances. And our current circumstances are extremely dire. We're in a world that's fraught not just with conflict, but with violence being generated continuously and people being exterminated. We are living through a period of genocide. At the same time, we have, as a state, seen and witnessed the hollowing out and corporate capture of that state itself. So it's within that framing of a context that I would really encourage our discussion about this government of national unity. And towards that end, I think it's important to remind all of us, those that participated in the election, placed a vote for a particular party. I did not see on the ballot sheet, or anyone else that participated shared with me, a block that said Government of National Unity. So towards that end, we need to be quite careful in conferring power to this structure that has been established in the form in which it has. We need to remain vigilant about the erosion of democracy we see taking place in front of us, where deals are being struck between political parties which may not even have constituency support, yet are elevated to positions of control over portfolios that affect us all. At the same time, we are not in any way being given a sense of confidence in the types of individuals that are being put forward, because none of this speaks to real issues confronting people. These are about who will occupy positions of power, but without a sense of what that power will be utilized for. So, Inayet, I hope these comments contribute to our discussion, but I really want us to shift away from talking about personalities, etc., and really confront the issue, the dire circumstances facing the majority of people in South Africa, in Southern Africa, on the African continent, the global South as a whole, as we confront a decaying, a decrepit collective West in decline significantly and pulling down many of other parts of the world with it. That's really where I think it's important to recognize the need for sovereignty and us ensuring a democracy for South Africa.
Well, Prof, you've opened up a whole host of issues, and clearly we will interrogate them a lot further. And I see Thabiso at Twala is with us. Thabiso, if you could unmute your mic, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for the welcome,
Yes,
being hosted by Salam Media in this regard.
Yes, Thabiso, I'd just like to bring you into this discussion, and I want to just follow up from what Prof is saying and talking about this sense of confidence in the government of national unity. And now I know you've said a lot, you've been writing a lot, I've been following some of your comments. Do you have this sense of confidence in this government of national unity?
Absolutely not. Just as Prof said, and in addition to what he said, this is a shame, which is based on, it has become elitist. The ANC government, together with their other parties, have become very elitist in their approach and mindset. And even this so-called GNU is based on elitism. These are elites who are pursuing an elitist agenda. At the end of the day, it's no more about us anymore. It's no more about the common citizen, as the Prof said earlier. And what is said is that some of the smaller parties that people trusted to perhaps be principled enough, are not principled themselves, because people are now looking at their stomachs. We are now living in an era of the stomach politics, if you may. It's all about people earning salaries more than anything else, so it's rather sad, to be honest with you. But then again, my take is the road actually began 30 years ago. We may actually point it at this so-called GNU now, but the road began much earlier. because even our transition itself had a lot of questions, had a lot of unanswered questions and so forth. An example thereof is that of the TRC. The TRC itself was declared by some to be a sham because it was only a handful of people that were outed, particularly from the side of the apartheid government, in relation to the assassinations, etc. But not much was really done. There was never any justice served 30 years ago. So for us to expect justice now, when it was never served then, it's rather, we are basically playing with ourselves, So this GNU for me, as I said, it's an elitist group of people coming together to enjoy the feeding trough, and that's it. That's what I see. It's never about people anymore. It never was about people at the end of the day. I mean, when you look at the interference from the outside the country, you see it's no more about us anymore. It's about elites connecting with elites outside the country also. And that's how I see it.
Thank you for that, Thabiso. And let's bring Yusuf Ismail into the Yusuf Patel. Yusuf, as MUSA now, I know the organization Movement for a United South Africa, and you've been working very, very hard, you and your team, even in the build-up to the elections, prior to the elections, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can actually expect from MUSA. But I just want to talk to you because, you are talking of a movement for a united South Africa. And I want to talk about the concept in itself of the government of national unity. Now, there are those that are saying that this is a cynical ploy designed to mask the underlying reality and control and also manipulation by powerful interests. Now, with statements like these that are made, and particularly looking at South Africa, the most unequal society in the world, and in terms of this government of national unity breaching that gap of inequality in this country. And I'm sure, on the ground as well, where you are, Yusuf, you and MUSA as well, a lot of work is being done and a lot of these issues are being addressed. You are talking about a number of these issues as well. So just looking at it purely from a unity perspective, how do you see this GNU?
Thanks, Inayet, and greetings again to everyone. Look, so from a MUSA perspective, we talk about uniting South Africans around socio-economic justice. So it's not unity at all costs. I think the critical issue is that, we talk about advocacy for socially active and conscious citizenry, for ethical, capable governance, and also for transformative approaches. So transformative ways of thinking, a transformative consciousness, and transformative activism, precisely to deal with the issues that you raise in terms of the kind of deep challenges that our country faces. For me, I think what's important is that we look at the government of national unity against the lens of the liberation aspirations of the mass of South Africans. So the majority Black African majority who have suffered the most under apartheid, and in a context of socioeconomic justice and redress, what would a government of this moment that we find ourselves in right now, what does it actually mean for those liberation aspirations? Now, I know, many people, there's some sense of relief that, taking the current circumstances, we actually have managed to still pull a semblance of some form of stability together. And, in the context of the massive upheaval in the political landscape, with the majority party losing its majority, the African National Congress, there could have been many different ways in which this could have panned out. There could have been instability, etc. So I think we must recognize that a lot has been done to try and maintain a semblance of stability and trying to bring everyone together, to say how do we move forward. But I think the fact that we've reached this point where the majority party as the ANC was holding the hopes and aspirations of the majority population, and we've reached a point where they've lost this majority, is actually a sad occasion. And we can go into the analysis of how things have deteriorated over the years, etc. But I think we need to actually look at this and say, what does this now mean for the full liberation of all South Africans? So it's not just about the political liberation, it's the full economic liberation. What does it mean for our economic sovereignty as a country? And we need to ask the question, if the government of national unity comes together just on the basis of stability and maintaining the status quo, is that enough? And clearly, in terms of also what some of the previous speakers have said, clearly that is not enough. We are dealing with major shifts and changes in the country. We've got massive demographic shifts in the country. We're sitting with a population that has grown from 40 million to 62 million over the period of this democracy. And we haven't risen up to the challenge of actually saying, what does it mean to actually change the fortunes of South Africans in a fundamental way? There's major global shifts that have taken place. There's we're finding there's a multipolar power system emerging in the world. There's major technological advances. So things are changing at a rapid pace. And I think just having a stable government with the current status quo, we need that, but we need much, much more. And I think it takes me to the next point of, we're going to need to look at some sort of extraordinary ways in which we look at things, more transformative ways in which we think through our issues and problems, transformative actions that can actually take us out of the situation that we are, and then look at building a future for South Africans that we can truly be, go back to our liberation aspirations and say, are we truly the kind of society, the kind of country that we, that we all aspire to, and where are we in relation to that? So I think the government of national unity is going to, has a huge task, and I think we've got a very clear framework by which we're going to be able to judge how this government of national unity comes together and undertakes this task. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Yusuf. And let's bring Phapano back into the discussion. Now, Phapano, as Yusuf also mentioned, and I think we all know it by now, that central to this government of national unity is the ANC, being the majority party. Now, I want to take a step back, and I know, you know the ANC quite well, and we take a step back even at the elective conference of the ANC that was held, and they spoke about renewal within the ANC. Was, when we talk of renewal, was this expected by people from within the ANC? And also at the same time, central to all of this is President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, some are saying that he must be commended for his strategic ministry configurations, allocations under very, very difficult, under tough conditions. But looking at Cyril Ramaphosa himself, because he is now the president, a lot obviously dependent on him, but also at the same time, in terms of meeting the expectations of the masses. Because we've seen the outcome of the elections, we've seen MK obviously doing extremely well. We've seen the likes of the EFF as well, who are now going to be in the opposition benches, and most likely those two parties will come together in terms of being an effective opposition. But the key issue here is looking at President Cyril Ramaphosa, looking at the ANC, and everything else that the ANC has been talking about. Now that they've got into bed with the likes of the DA, with the likes of the PA, with the likes of the Freedom Front Plus, what does this actually mean for the ANC itself?
No, thank you so much. One has to really go back to history, because in many instances, when I listen to many pundits, and ordinary discussions, one gets a sense that we seem to be yearning for this ANC that never existed. Yes, in theory, there has been some aspirations of this liberation project, but for decades and what the ANC in many instances has, has linked to the right, and one can actually go to the 50s when, with the Freedom Charter, and you had Africanists within the ANC who fought hard to ensure that, there was no corporate capture of the ANC. And this was way back in the 50s, the likes of Robert Sobukwe and Yolibalo and many others. So what is happening in the ANC, as I've indicated, it's not really new. It's just history repeating itself. And what you have is that you have, different actors. And if I may go to 2012 in particular, when Cyril was elected as the deputy president, for many of us, we foresaw the end of the ANC, because Cyril literally stands for everything that, the ANC characterizes itself as. Because it clearly says that they are a disciplined force of the left, biased to the poor and the working class. And 2012, they then decided, to then elect a capitalist. And the reality is that Cyril has never said he is nothing else but a capitalist. And even when we went to these elections, especially if you look at some of the events that took place, rallying behind Palestine, the Muslim vote, and so on. When I saw that, and I had a discussion with you, I believe, that for me it was an indictment that you had particular communities which were able to be duped by the elites within the ANC. And I think that's what we don't learn. And again, time and time again, we seem to want to lament on what the ANC could have been, what it is. But many scholars, if you look at the likes of Patrick Bond, if you look at Professor McCain's and many others. I grew up, when I joined the Youth League, for example, in 2000, already there was an anti-privatization movement as a result of the decisions which were then taken by President Mbeki. So it's just a culmination of many incidences. So it's, for me, as I've indicated, we seem to want to, idealize what the ANC seemingly must stand for, and what we seem to miss, which I think for me should be a way forward, is starting to organize organs of people's power, because you've got many institutions which are, highly concerned about issues of poverty, inequality, the challenges in the global south, the war, in fact, the genocide in Palestine. So for me, it's being able to mobilize these organs of, as I said, of people's power. Because what you cannot take away is that South Africa, and we all know that it's highly captured, and it's not a new phenomenon. So with the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa and with this GNU, it was going to happen. It was a question of when. And now you have your Helen Zille and many racists, very boisterous. And for us again to accept, or to accept some level of honor or political conscience from the ANC, I think we're just asking too much, especially from the president himself, because of his history and the fact that he has managed to buy many comrades within the ANC. So these are challenges that we need to confront. These are realities that we need to grapple with. But in the main, as I've said, and I've consistently said this, especially, having been part of the system, having managed to confront the establishment, the reality is that those who speak of, who present an antithesis to capitalism, monopoly capitalism and the industrial military complex, the reality is that all these people are highly disorganized. Because in order to confront a particular battle, you must, at some point, you must recognize, you can theorize on what needs to happen, but at some point, you need to come to this reality that something needs to be done and something needs to change. So I do respect such, some of these conversations, and I think they are important conversations. But ultimately, we need to start engaging on how do we then, unravel, how do we shake, how do we confront this GNU? Because clearly, and in closing, as the colleagues have indicated, the panelists have indicated, this GNU does not represent the will of the people. This is not what the majority of South Africans voted for. But the people are in their homes, they're not doing much. They're just waiting for a spark. So you need some sort of confrontation to this GNU, which is not in the interest of the people, which represents the interest of corporate South Africa and foreign capital. So let me just end it here, Mr. Inayet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Phapano. I see Tahir Maepa has joined us. Tahir, assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Hey, walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Tahir, we're going to go straight to you before I get to Prof. Rasigan again. And until now, we've just been getting just an overview in terms of the thinking behind the government of national unity and what are some of the related issues. Now, it is clear at this point in time that there are more concerns than anything else that have been expressed by all the panelists who are present with this discussion this evening. Just looking at it from your side now, we are hearing so much coming out, and some are even going as far as saying that South Africa has now surrendered its own independence back to the previous oppressors on a silver platter by forming this government of national unity.
Good evening, Inayet, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Look, we have entered uncharted waters. This is something that nobody would have expected that it will ever happen in our lifetime. And what we are seeing is not nation building. We are seeing a lot of arrogance. We are seeing a lot of mudslinging. We are seeing a lot of people who in the past would not have really taken seriously being in charge of the future of the majority of South Africans. But what is even scary about the current trajectory that we have entered is not so much about the so-called government of national unity, because there's no government of national unity. What we are seeing a situation where a group of capitalists within the ANC have now literally merged with the broader capitalist movement and a Zionist grouping within South Africa. Now, that comes with a number of challenges. And from the working class point of view, we all know, for instance, what the Democratic Alliance stands for, insofar as the workers are concerned. They subscribe to extreme free market system that will eventually lead to a lot of government-owned assets being privatized, where public service is going to shrink to the bone, meaning that a lot of public servants will either have to lose jobs or they will have to be outsourced to private entities that are going to be given to the very same funders who have been investing millions, if not billions,
Yes, I think we have lost Tahir. I'm sure he'll join us shortly. But Prof, let's get back to you. And Tahir obviously was talking about the capitalist system, and initially I spoke about white monopoly capital coming together with black monopoly capital, and you talk about this global capitalist system as well. But I'm sure you've looked at governments of national unity right across the entire world. And now that we are seeing it, now that we are experiencing a government of this sort firsthand, beyond our wildest dreams, beyond all expectations, the key issue here is looking at South Africa and what would make South Africa so different from governments of national unity in other parts around the world.
So, as I think the colleagues on the panel and comrades have also raised itself, this is a new phenomenon for us because it's something that's been crafted after a mandate has been given. There were talks of coalitions, etc., prior to the elections, and I think people engaged in those debates. None of them actually provided an alternative on the ballot sheet itself. So it's important recognizing that these attempts at forging these alliances predates even the election itself. So we need to be careful about what this then means. As the comrade Tahir was raising, this is very much uncharted space, as we all know. I think it's important for us to recognize the function that government plays inside capitalist societies. And it's a point I tried to raise earlier in it as well. And if we focus in on that, we'll recognize its role is to steer the system towards further accumulation of the ruling class. You see, so we should not be surprised by these behaviors. Number two, and here I think what Comrade Yusuf was raising, we need to also be careful about what stability of an unequal and unjust system actually implies for us. And this sort of consolidation around the notion of stability may be actually fixing and making much more difficult for us to escape from issues such as inequality, etc. Comrade Tahir was raising the issue of maybe we may have job losses that follow. We also have to think about the actual public services that people depend on for staying alive, including health, education, security, etc. So when we talk about privatization, it's not just about people losing jobs. It's also about these facilities needing to be purchased by people who are not earning incomes. I hope I'm expressing myself clearly enough. We have a political economy that's not working. It's a range of relationships that have forged ahead to make us more unequal. It has not equalized society. And that's quite critically important in terms of what we talk about, in terms of what's required. It cannot be, colleagues, that for us to expect what has happened over 3 decades of failure to redress the legacies we've inherited and to embark upon a process that incorporates all of us in building a system that's not part of world systems, just about accumulation. So, framed in that way, let's relook at what it is that we are confronted by. For me, colleagues, it's not about confronting the GNU. We need to confront governance within a system defined by a constitution that was written by people. We, as the people, have written that constitution. It cannot be that we become slaves to its words as opposed to needing to change it organically based on our circumstances. And it's quite important then, pushing forward on this, asking the question. There was a need for reforming the political system as a whole. These should have been, by now, 30 years into a transition, become part of our constitution itself. It cannot be that we're still voting on the basis of minority and majority rights today. As all South Africans, we need to think about the type of unity that's required of us globally. And within that, the huge and onerous responsibilities placed to us. Climate change is here, colleagues. Do we have any confidence in these individuals, now 75, that are meant to lead a state? Let me, if you don't mind, Inayet, to present just an alternative to us. Yeah? We have, as the second largest economy in world systems, this is capitalist systems, a country that is not fully capitalist, which is the People's Republic of China. 1.4 billion people, the second largest economy, and soon to become a high income per capita. That's a massive change. They have a state council of 26. They have 38 departments that report to it. What are we dealing with? I hope I'm making this thing clear enough to us. We must really not get caught up in the framework that is being told to us. We need to return to what we require based on our real circumstances, and as confronted by that, forge ways in which we respond to it. We have to be very careful of losing all of the hard-gained benefits that have accumulated through struggle, now being compromised because of the type of alliances, especially between this thing called the Democratic Alliance and the rest of the South African parties involved. This dilution could really also prove to be hugely difficult to escape from, colleagues. I hope I've expressed this concern with the seriousness that it deserves.
You have, Prof. In fact, no, you certainly have, Prof. And in fact, I actually want to just revisit what you said about the People's Republic of China, because, we have been hearing so much about efficient governance in South Africa. Now we've got a bloated cabinet. We've got 70 odd people that make up the cabinet as well. And some of these parties, like the DA, have been calling, and they've always, they've criticized the ANC in the past of bloated governance. Now they are part and parcel of this bloated government, 2 deputy ministers. Now, all of that in terms of running an efficient government. But I just want to bring Tahir back into the discussion. Tahir, I know we lost you, and I just want you to continue, and we'll then get you to be so.
Yeah, look, without rehashing what has been said, look, we all know the circumstances of our country. This government is currently loaning about 1.2 billion a day just to service the loan that we have with multiple lenders. Now, that's a lot of money. 1.2 billion rand a day, it's a lot of money. So you are loaning to pay the loan. That's where we are sitting. And yet we have grown-ups who are leaders of political parties who found it reasonable to expand the current cabinet and to basically balloon the expenditure of the state, because of all these guys that we saw being sewn in today. They are going to have offices, they are going to have they are going to have people working with them. They are going to have people who are their chefs, their secretaries, their ushers. They are, because of it, being a minister or a deputy minister in this country is like being a legal god of some sort. You get served. That is why they forget how to serve the people. Now, all these things are things that we should be worried about as a country, to say that, but these politicians, these political parties who led us to believe that by voting for them, we will be giving the mandate to them to advance our aspirations and the need of the people. Were they sincere? And we need to speak about parties that came, especially the so-called Muslim parties, who were up in arms, calling the DA names and all those kinds of things, trying to lure Muslims to vote for them. Now they are going to dine with the very same people whom they were claiming that they are supporting the genocide of Palestine and all that. And we've heard what the ANC has said, that they are not going to abandon their position on Palestine. But let's be honest, when you are in government of this sort, it is obviously they are going to tone down the fundamentals that were really uniting this country, are going to be toned down. The majority of our people are living in squalor. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Our infrastructure is falling apart and it's not getting better. Now, all these things, when you compound them with the current law that we have, how are we going to make sure that we assess that these people are effective or they are not? It's going to be completely difficult for us to be able to do that. The poor have been forgotten. It's all about the elites and the elitist system that has been created in the country, especially with the advent of President Ramaphosa being the president of the country. That elitist system that is fueled by private interest is now completely in charge of the country. Now, the question is that how are the issues that relates to ordinary citizens of this country are going to be pushed? The DA, for instance, doesn't agree with NHI. They don't agree with the provisions of the minimum wage. They believe the Labor Relations Act needs to be amended in order to make it easy for companies to fire people without following the procedure and all that. And you can see the arrogance that they have currently, that they are really in charge and nobody is challenging them. So we are heading for a very difficult period in the country. Now, after having said that, what should happen, because of government of national unity or whatever you want to call it, is there, is moving. What are we going to do as ordinary citizens, as civil society, and South Africans as a broad community? We need to start saying, fine, we may not like what is happening, we may not appreciate or support it. However, these are the people in government. And as citizens, we need to do what citizens are supposed to be doing. We need to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that these people deliver on whatever promises that they've been promised. We need to have civil society working on the ground to check that indeed there is some improvement. They need to check if our clinics are capacitated to have enough nurses, to have enough medication. And if that is not happening, those are constitutional things that we need to take it up as civil, because we can no longer rely on these people to push the agenda of ordinary citizens. We need to do it ourselves. And as a country, as people, we are more powerful than politicians. And I believe if we get united with one thing in mind, social justice for all South Africans, then I believe that we can be able to push them to do the right thing. Complaining about them is not going to help us. We need to start being active citizens and start doing something to make sure that things change.
Yes, and just to bring Thabiso back into the discussion, Thabiso, just looking at it from an ordinary citizen's perspective, will the ordinary citizen bear the burden of this government of national unity, and which is also termed as being orchestrated subjugation? Professor Rasigan spoke at length about this capitalist system. Now, obviously, we will be talking about higher taxes. We're talking about a system that needs to be sustained, and a system that is very, very expensive, I must say, at this point in time, particularly with a bloated government, with a bloated cabinet, and taking all of this into account. What price is the ordinary person, the ordinary man in the street going to pay for this?
Inayet, we're sitting with a 30% plus unemployment rate as it is. Now, with the increase in tariffs and what have you, I'm foreseeing a Kenya moment. I think we're going to have a Kenya moment in the country. I mean, we have had service delivery protests over the years under the ANC government. Now, under the GNU government, I don't know how should I call it, because as I said earlier on, and Tahir is actually alluding to it, that it's a government of elitists. We're going to have a Kenya moment. We're going to have people going back to the streets, marching, and I don't know how will the police conduct themselves in this regard. If people will be killed and what have you. But that's what I'm foreseeing. Because I mean, sitting at 30% unemployment and with tariffs increasing, we've had situations of, I'm now talking about ordinary people here. We have situations of illegal connection of electricity, etc. That may escalate because nobody wants to be out of electricity for argument's sake. You understand? You're going to have the increase in land invasions and whatever because there seems to be no pragmatic action in as far as to address the issue of settlements is concerned. And also the very same, the simplest of issues, tarring roads, that has not been done. I mean, I'm living in an area whereby even prior to the previous elections, roads have never been tarred. In fact, they used to use the tarring of roads as an election gimmick, as I would call it. But now, because of now we are in an elitist government now, and even then, they don't care. So what I'm foreseeing now is a Kenya moment that is going to come through for us here. And I just want to touch on what the professor raised about China. That China went into a transitional period whereby you had Mao's socialist or communist reforms, which were then, for China to be where it is, was because of Chairman Deng Xiaoping. Deng was the one who introduced reforms, but it was a process. And those reforms never, how can I put it, isolated the ordinary citizens of China. Hence, China has the largest number of millionaires, if not billionaires, in the world, because of nobody was left out. But South Africa is a new country. We are the most unequal society in the world. So for us to start talking about technicalities like climate change, this and that, granted, those are there. But then again, when will the inequalities be addressed? Because this GNU elitist grouping will never address our issues. As Tahir said, they're going to tone down on a lot of things. Right now, the ANC's only credibility, if you may, or the only leg they have to stand in as far as them being viewed as a liberation movement, as a people's-oriented movement, is Palestine. Outside them supporting Palestine, there's no ANC. So now you have this grouping of people, your DA, who basically is anti-everything that has been fought for over the last 30 years, joining together with them. So there's basically no hope for the ordinary citizens. As I'm saying that, I'm foreseeing a Kenya moment for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Thabiso. Yusuf, just to bring you back into the discussion, and early on, you spoke about social justice, but also I think with the conflicting ideologies within this so-called government of national unity, because I see all the panelists obviously are not convinced that this is truly a government of national unity. So I'm going to call it a so-called government national of unity. Looking at the question of social justice and the meeting out of social justice, and as Thabiso alluded to, the only issue has been Palestine. But even within the Palestinian struggle, within the Palestinian movement, within the support of Palestine, you've got these ideologies in this government. You've got the PA, for instance. You've had a person like Gayton McKenzie prior to the election spewing hatred, spewing venom against the people of Palestine. We've seen the position of the Democratic Alliance failing to call what is playing out in Gaza as a genocide, and even looking at the Russia-Ukraine situation. We've seen a number of these members of cabinet who have been the guests of the Zionist entity as well. And when we talk about social justice being meted out in South Africa, if you could not meet or you could not even speak out against social injustices in other parts around the world, these are now people in government. How are they going to meet social justice in this country?
Yeah, Inayet, look, I think, it's not a perfect world. I mean, we all know what the ideals are, right? But we're dealing with the situation as is. And I think it's easy to lose hope. But we must also just factor in that, we're dealing with a range of different forces. And how do we want to position ourselves to be able to, on the basis of what we have, utilize it and still make gains towards socioeconomic justice and redress? And I think a kind of transformative visionary approach to how we want to reimagine the country we want to live in, the societies we want to build. So we've got a government of national unity. What is going to be needed is for this government to really understand that its mandate is not coming from any particular political party. So, but its mandate, if you look at it more broadly, right? If you look at them, a lot of people that have actually not even voted in this election, and you could speculate the reasons why, but a large part of it is because people are maybe despondent situation. A lot of people are unable to participate, and there's a lot of apathy, etc. And if you look at collectively, what does this mean? It means that this government of national unity will have to understand its role as being service to the nation, and will have to understand its role as being a trusteeship. It's holding a trusteeship to continue these liberation aspirations that we've spoken about. Now, obviously, whether they're going to do it by themselves or with continuous civil society and citizenry pressure, I think that's the critical thing. But that's where we need to move this government of national unity into, and ensure that they abide by a mandate of the people. And they're going to need to ensure that there's some sort of center that holds, because, like you're saying, it's made up of a lot of different elements. But we're going to need to make sure that there's a center that holds, that can carry forward this, this process of advancing things, but also ensure that as it's been done with, with the perspective of really understanding how we can actually move towards ethical, capable governance, build a meritocracy, a leadership that is built on service to the nation and is visionary in terms of what it wants to build and create in this country, and is visionary in terms of being courageous, like the Chinese of the example of the Chinese that the Prof has mentioned. That takes courage, and that takes whether you're going to find one or collective or through citizenry pressure, we're going to ensure that we get this meritocracy, that we actually inspire this visionary leadership across society, and that we inspire courage and confidence, so that we can travel on a path. We can build new kind of economic models and paradigms and delivery systems that can actually change the fortunes of our country. So I don't think we must see this government of unity that actually holds us to ransom. We must actually see ourselves as shaping the agenda for this government of national unity. And I think that's a way in which, as citizens, we can take things back, as socially conscious, active citizens. I think, there's a whole range of things. I mean, we spoke about, I think Thabiso was mentioning unemployment. I think our issue that we're facing with is half of our population, that's 30 million people in South Africa, over 30 million people, are under the age of 30. That's a youthful population. And within that age group, the unemployment rate is 70%. So I think that's the issue we're talking about. And that's why we need to ensure that we're talking about a government that can begin to understand its role also within the context of building a developmental state, right? Because the state has to be the instrument that can regulate, whether it's regulating capital, the markets, and building platforms for inclusive and participatory governance. So I think, we've got a constitution that talks about participatory governance, and I think we need to now move beyond this kind of consultative governance that is just there to paper over cracks and just look at it as a tick box exercise that you've consulted with people, but it's not genuine. I think we need to move towards building real participatory governance that talks about involvement of people in their own solutions. It talks about local, building local community infrastructure, local social capital, local economic development, community-based kind of processes, and even organically from a civil society point of view, beginning to rebuild our society from that perspective, so that we're not shaped by this, this every 5-year timeline where everybody talks about elections and gets excited, but on a day-to-day basis, we're actually organically building this on the ground. So I don't think it's a free ticket for this government of national unity. I think we need to look at this as an opportunity for how we can actually, in this moment, begin to say all the kind of things that we've seen has gone wrong. How can we in this moment reorganize all of that and begin to, rebuild differently? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, Prof, Yusuf speaks about a developmental state, but how do you develop when the horse has already bolted, number one? And because this new government obviously has inherited a mess second to none. And in terms of a model that is workable for this government of national unity, or so-called government of national unity, where we spoke at length about the capitalist system and the capitalist model, but there are many to the left of this government that are talking of a socialist model. And you've followed what has been taking place in China, and perhaps we should use this opportunity to look at the Chinese model, to look at the Chinese model of governance, of efficient governance. We spoke about the numbers. There are very few that are within the corridors of power that are managing 1.4 billion, as you mentioned, citizens. And yeah, we're talking about 60 million, and we have this bloated government, or this bloated cabinet, for want of a better term. And just to look at this model and what system, or what can we actually learn, perhaps even from a country like China.
So I think, and I'm very glad to listen to also the comments that have been made, but I think it's important to us also reflecting on our own experiences, just from the panelists that are constituting this grouping itself. In 30 years, we've not seen the formation of a developmental state in South Africa. If anything, we've seen the hollowing out of even what state apparatuses that we inherited from the apartheid regime previously. A second point in recognizing, and Inayet, you're absolutely correct about this, social justice under the regime of capitalism is not possible. And it's important for us to recognize that. What is possible under a capitalist regime is us advancing certain productive forms and expanding on it. Here we have failed. And let's be clear about the numbers. 42% of working age South Africans are not in employment. The number for those aged between 15 and 24 is 61%. These are the numbers, Yusuf, you're absolutely correct, that constitute major challenges. And we need to ask ourselves whether government, and we need to be careful not to say government is the state. Government is meant to at least organize and coordinate the activities of the state, which are much wider than just government itself. And towards this end, yes, we must act to hold them accountable. But I'm encouraging colleagues that we don't have a false hope that's being created that somehow what we're seeing as this GNU offers us solutions. Rather, as Yusuf has pointed out, and as the other comrades on the panel have also alluded to, there is a multiplicity of power relations being established. That's what multipolarity actually means. And multipolarity is not only the relations between states in world systems, it's also inside countries that multipolarity exists. And towards that end, us really concentrating, as Comrade Patel has pointed out, at building from the grassroots upwards, real alternatives. And these alternatives have to seek to transcend capitalism, which is a death wish. And we know this. And I'm sorry, the comrade that mentioned earlier that climate change is a trivial issue and that may be left to a technicality. When the temperature is over 45 degrees, comrade, I'd like to see how we survive socially in such context. That's our objective reality, and that's what we start to need building. It means building beyond what capitalism offers us, not trying to enhance it. Capitalism is not the solution. It's not the end point of our being. And towards that end, we cannot hope that it solves our problems. It is a means towards an end. And that's what we have to show up if we want to have integrity as well. I hope I've been clear about that, Inayet.
Thank you for that, Tahir. Just to bring you back into the discussion, and I just want to talk about opposition politics, because it is clear that this GNU has now changed the dynamics of how we're going to be seeing opposition politics in this country and what happens to the oppositions in the corridors of power. Now, there was a question that was raised about the ANC, if it was sincere, why didn't the ANC go to the likes of the EFF or even to the MK and form a government together to the left of the political landscape? But again, we learned about this government of national unity obviously has been structured around what takes place around the world, the fear of a global capital downgrade, all of that. We're talking of the United States, we're talking of America. But again, on the other side, we have BRICS partners of that have come together. We've seen an extension of BRICS with many other countries that have joined BRICS. Now, all of this put together raises again questions as to where the ANC government is, where do their loyalties lie, and why have they not moved to the left rather than move to parties with neoliberal policies like the DA and others?
Yeah, the situation that we are faced with is that none of us who are sitting here, and I'm sure a majority of South Africans out there know exactly what this GNU is and what is its makeup. None of us. We can only speculate and have our own wishes in terms of how we want this thing to unfold. But one thing that we have is that we've got multiple parties who are forming some get together with different manifestos, with different economic policies, with different social impact policies. Now, how they are going to merge that into a policy that is going to speak to what government of national unity it's supposed to be, I don't know, and I don't think it's even possible. Now, let's go back 30 years ago. 30 years ago, when President Nelson Mandela constituted government of national unity, he said this, and I still remember his words very carefully. He said that they are constituting a government of national unity under the policies of the African National Congress that were consulted with the people, that were consulted with civil society, that were endorsed by the movement, and that policy is reconstruction and development policy. It was clear. And he said, anybody who's in this government of national unity will have to conform and advance the reconstruction and development program. It was very clear. Now, what are we talking about now? What policies has the current president, who obviously want to be a Nelson Mandela of our time, is he put into the nation? He's saying to us, we are still going to Cabinet Lekgotla to go and discuss these things. Now, that in itself is a problem, because Cabinet Lekgotla has got nothing to do with political parties. Political parties are still constitutional bodies by themselves. The cabinet is the cabinet of the president. And here we're talking now what the provisions of the Constitution are saying. They serve at the behest of the president, meaning that he's supposed to have a policy of his government that all the ministers, irrespective of whether they are from DA or PA, they will have to conform to. But is that the case? It is not, unfortunately. Now, this is the kind of dilemma that we find ourselves in. And that is why I said earlier on that the only way is for the citizens of this country, civil society, to take over this fallen baton and run with it. Because if we are going to say that we are going to rely on this Lord, I promise you 5 years will pass, nothing is going to be achieved, and our people will be in the worst possible condition. Now, there's an issue of and
Tahir,
it's good enough.
Tahir, sorry, can I just Tahir, can I just stop you there for a minute? I've just been notified that we need to do a quick crossover to the Gauteng legislature. Premier Panyaza Lesufi is announcing members of the Gauteng Executive Council. So I'm going to put all of you on hold. In fact, what we will do is we will just watch this announcement for a few minutes, and perhaps we can even comment on that as we hear what who he has obviously who is going to form part and parcel of the Gauteng government.
Questioning the outcome of these elections. Ever since the election results were released, we've been crisscrossing various floors and political parties' offices to develop an outcome that will be sufficient and be enough to run government in Gauteng. The political party that I have the honor to lead and to represent, the African National Congress, have literally met with all the political parties that are represented in the legislature. We want to thank all the leaders of these particular parties for their unwavering support for government of provincial unity. We commit ourselves as the African National Congress to work with each and every party and to fulfill the desires of the people of our province. What is important in everything that we're going to do now is openness, transparency, compromise, and communication, so that these become the hallmark of our administration. As earlier indicated, these are uncharted waters. There will be missteps, there will be misunderstanding, and there will be issues that will bring us together, but must also accept there will be issues that will divide us. I always argue, and I want to maintain that argument, that in the boxing match, it's better to box inside the boxing ring because there are rules and regulations, rather than to box outside the boxing ring where there are no rules and regulations. With this government of provincial unity, we've accepted to work within the boxing ring so that we can deal with the laws and regulations that manage this form of relationship in a better way. I present to you the parties that have agreed to be part of this relationship. We have been guided by government of national unity principles, and we've been further guided by those that have signed this agreement so that we can be part, or so that they can be part of the government of provincial unity. We want to thank the Democratic Alliance for presenting to us their deputy speaker. We want to thank the IFP, who will be mentioned in the Executive Council, RISE, Mzansi, as well as the Patriotic Alliance. We further work together with other political parties that have accepted to be part of government of provincial unity, but chose to use the Gauteng Provincial Legislature as their terrain of operation. As I said, when I delivered my acceptance speech at the legislature, we've been asked to work together. To work together, we will do. We've been asked to combine our thoughts for a better Gauteng. To combine our thoughts, we will do together. We've been asked to leave no one behind. Today, we all declare that no one will be left behind unless they choose not to be part of the government of provincial unity. I want to emphasize this. There is no door that is closed. This door will be permanently opened, and those that want to join government of provincial unity will be free to join it. But it was Tony Joyce who said, and I quote, "Broken eggs make the best omelette, but you can't build society with broken men and women," end quote. So our task from today is to build a better Gauteng. Our task from now is to make Gauteng attractive. Attractive for all families, attractive for all forms of investments, attractive for workers, attractive for the youth and students, attractive for sporting and cultural events, attractive and safe for our women and children. Our mandate is simple. Crime, corruption, and lawlessness must be crushed mercilessly. Our mandate is simple. Municipalities must play their part so that we can support them. Our mandate is simple. We must revitalize our CBDs, in particular Johannesburg, our townships, in particular Alexander, our hostels, in particular Stocha hostels, our informal settlement, in particular Makau's informal settlement in Germiston. We are ready to make this institution better again. We also extend our appreciation to the members of the Executive Council, the DG, and heads of departments who provided the leadership needed in the sixth administration. I want to personally thank all the MECs that were part of the sixth administration. I had a difficult task and a difficult mandate to leave others, not out of choice, but out of the political circumstances that we find ourselves in. As we transition to the seventh administration, we welcome our new speaker, Madam Morakani Musupse, and the deputy speaker, Madam Refilio Ntsege, and they fully enjoy our support to lead our legislature. Today, we bring to you the new leadership and members of the Executive Council, assigned to steer the ship towards a better Gauteng. The team will from this week start their work consolidating the election manifestos of our different parties so that we can develop a shared vision for Gauteng, a shared vision of prosperity, a shared vision of service delivery, a shared vision to eliminate crime, corruption, and lawlessness. I have the honor to present the following men and women to be part of the Executive Council of the 7th Administration in Gauteng. The modernization of government and the need to embrace innovation and technology will be the hallmark of this administration. It is within this context that we've assigned MEC Bonginkosi Dlamini from the IFP to lead this modernization through the Department of eGov. To steer the finances of our province and to accelerate economic growth of our province, we are appointing MEC Lebogang Maile to lead our treasury as well as the Department of Economic Development. our skills development program, and the desire to educate our children will be led by MEC Matume Chilwan. We are also adding a new responsibility to this portfolio of education by adding the Department of Sports, Arts, Culture, and Recreation. Our e-health program to modernize our health facilities and promote good living lifestyles, and to ensure that our hospitals meet the standard, if not better standards of private hospitals, and to use technology and innovation not only to improve our hospitals, clinics, and our medical facilities, but to ensure that our hospitals are ready for the implementation of NHI. We want to be the first province to move with speed in the implementation of NHI. And I'm proud to announce MEC Nomantunko Moralo Hoko as the head of this department. Our roads and transport portfolio will be led by MEC Gidiboni Dialetlabela, who's assigned the major task to accelerate the speed train between Limpopo and Gauteng. She's also assigned the task of modernizing our roads and launching our infrastructure development program in our province using the necessary transport modes to connect strategic areas of our province. We are of the view that an area like Rustenburg might be in Northwest, but is growing towards Gauteng, and you must connect the transport mode. We are further convinced an area like Sosselbeck that might be in the Free State, but it might grow towards Gauteng. We are also interested to harness the economic potential of Harrismith, which is 3 hours to KZN, 3 hours to Free State, Bloemfontein, and 3 hours to Gauteng. Take into consideration the new e-commerce and cargo business. We have the strong view that Harrismith is a strategic area that must be linked with Gauteng through all forms of transport mode. And that is why this task is assigned to MEC Gidiboni Dialetlabela. But we want to improve our townships. We want to improve our informal settlements. We further want to improve our hostels. But we can't leave our central business district so dirty and so bad the way they are. It always pains us that Johannesburg CBD is no longer the Johannesburg CBD that we want. We want to enter into strategic partnership with the Johannesburg municipality and other municipalities that have strategic CBDs in their areas. Our CBDs can't survive through cash loans and cell phone repairs. We want these CBDs to be vibrant again and to be repositioned to be the centers of our economic activities and to present job opportunities to our people and ensure that they represent who we are as South Africans. And this mandate is given to MEC Tasnim Motara as the new head of human settlement in our province. Our agenda to protect the weak, the poor, and vulnerable members of our society will now be led from the office of the Premier. The fight against crime is going to the center of this government. We are migrating this responsibility to the office of the Premier so that we can lead and champion the fight against crime, corruption, and lawlessness. We can't surrender our province to criminals. We can't be scared of our own shadows and convert our own houses to be prisons because criminals are doing as they wish. We strongly believe the utilization of creative ways of technology, innovation, and the increase of personnel to fight crime in our province must be a priority. If there is one priority for the 7th administration and the government of Gauteng in the next 5 years, it's our relentless efforts to confront and fight crime head on. And that's why this responsibility has been brought to the office of the Premier. There is an urgent need for food security and fighting urban hunger and the establishment of a state farm so that we can be in a position to consolidate the work that we're doing in this sector. It gives me great pleasure to invite Ms. Vuyiswa Ramokgopa from RISE Mzansi to join the 7th administration as the MEC responsible for agriculture and rural development. There's an urgent need for us to improve our infrastructure, and there's also an urgent need for us to coordinate the work that we're doing with local government. Our view is very simple. If we can't get the necessary systems within local government, the infrastructure development and the new infrastructures that we want to introduce in our province will be meaningless. There will be delays in local government. There will further be delays at strategic areas where we need to introduce new infrastructure. So the MEC that will be responsible for infrastructure development and COCTA will be MEC Jacob Mamabolo, so that this task can be attended to and be concluded. We also feel that there is an urgent need for us to protect the weak, the poor, and the vulnerable. That our relationship with non-government organizations is a very important relationship that unfortunately there were serious missteps. We need to rectify this. Our NGOs are doing work on behalf of government and they must be treated with respect. They are not doing us a favor. We also need to duplicate the work that they do and ensure that we run a seamless institution that does not give them headaches and troubles. It's within this context that I want to wholeheartedly apologize to this sector for the pain and the misery that they're going through. I've taken a decision to appoint MEC Faith Mazibugo to be the MEC that will be responsible for social development so that she can repair this relationship and provide shelter to the homeless and also provide support to those that are poor and vulnerable in our society. With the pending environmental challenges in unlocking economic opportunities and the reality of climate change, we felt that the Department of Environment must be a standalone department so that we can clean Gauteng. Our province is dirty. Our cities are dirty. And this can't be left on an ad hoc basis. Where municipalities are failing to clean our communities, we want to take that responsibility as provincial government to clean our cities and to clean our communities. It's within this context that we have appointed MEC Sheila Mary Peters from the Patriotic Alliance to lead this important task of establishing this new department. We are quite convinced we will be in a position to build a better Gauteng, we'll be in a position to be proud of a new Gauteng, a Gauteng that will fight crime, a Gauteng that will fight corruption, and a Gauteng that will fight lawlessness. We are here to serve, and we are here to ensure that Gauteng is competitive. To these new leaders, I want to wholeheartedly welcome you and congratulate you on your new responsibilities. Thank you so much.
Well, that was a live crossover, and we've just heard about the GPU, the Gauteng province, and the appointments that have been made. And we've had our panelists, Tahir, Maepa, Yusuf, Patel, and we've had Professor Rasigan, Maharaj, and Thabiso Twala listening in. And Thabiso, I know you've been quiet for a while, so let me get straight through to you. And, we've heard Panyaza Lusufi speak about transparency. He spoke about compromise that is needed. He spoke about misunderstanding. He spoke about a boxing ring, broken eggs and an omelette, consolidating manifestos, all of that. And just, what do you make of it? What do you make of the GPU?
I think if there's anything that Panyaza and most of our politicians have mastered is the art of talking and building castles in the air and taking us with. We have been taken for a ride for quite a while now. So this glossy speech is just that for me. It is just glossy, nothing more, nothing less. He speaks about all the difficulties that the province has experienced as if it is something new. So it's actually rather annoying, in my opinion, for him to actually talk as if it is the first time that he's a premier. I mean, what was he doing previously? So he's basically repeating what he said earlier. Perhaps even not by verbatim per se, but there's nothing new in his speech. Like I'm saying, he's just building castles in the air, trying to fool us again. The problems that the province had been experiencing from your housing, from just about everything as mentioned, they've been there, even when he became premier. So I don't know what's new. What's new that is he saying? I think the only thing that is new now is perhaps some of the new people in his cabinet, which is inclusive of his of the ANC's friends in the GNU, and that's it. There's nothing really interesting. I found nothing to look forward to on a personal level. Perhaps those who are pro this government will be excited with his speech, but I'm not, honestly. I really am not.
Well, let's check with Prof. Rasigan. Are you excited?
Well, I can be excited, but in a very negative way as well. So, colleagues, watching this announcement was quite shocking. There are 6.5 million registered voters in Gauteng. 3.9 million voted in the election. 2.6 did not. And there were only about 34,000 spoiled ballots. So towards that end, and again, there was a single party that received a majority. And as our colleague has just mentioned, it's that same structure that won the majority that also has presided over the circumstances that we currently find ourselves in. So what would have been of particular interest, and I think what could have excited us maybe positively, it was an acknowledgement of the type of challenges that have not been addressed and what is going to be done to do that. Naming of these individuals towards ends, raises more questions than actually provides answers. I think what's going to be very important for us going ahead, Gauteng is the largest province by population. It's also the largest contributor to our gross domestic product at present. We need to be quite careful in terms of how this province is constituted. It cannot be that it continues along the lines that has led to the description offered by Panyaza. And we really have to have those that made those decisions taking responsibility. People's lives were lost during a health crisis in this province. I have not seen the acknowledgement of that. And how are we going to redress it? Those were made on the basis of austerity decisions with respect to public spending. We've yet to see the accountability around that. Yet we have people being put into positions to build trust. Trust also means integrity in terms of your commitment towards addressing the problems that we are confronted by. The last one for me, and I think this one maybe is something that does open up. There was mention by Panyaza of linkages to spaces outside of the province that provide important contributions to this province's development. I would read that also as a questioning of what constitutes ourselves as a province. These were constructs that came out of our 30 years ago reconciliation process. We should now have matured enough to recognize the economy underpinning this political division. And towards that end, constitute ourselves as a viable local government. And that's not what I see happening. We have corridors whereby people still commute to work. That was what was established under racial capitalism and actually regulated under apartheid. What has changed? Every morning when I look out on the roads, we see lines of Putco buses. I live in Tshwane. Yeah. Those Putco buses could very well be a train because that's how long they extend, bringing people in from the townships that continue to be residences and not economic hubs itself. These are the types of things we would have expected someone with the experience of having engaged with the province to now be suggesting ways out of. But just naming people to portfolios, I'm sorry, doesn't meet that criteria. So there isn't anything objective to actually respond to other than, well, maybe the names sound nice, but that's as far as I can offer at the moment, Inayet.
Thank you for that, Prof. Yusuf, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, again, I mean, I think Gauteng, as was mentioned, houses 25% of the country's population. So, and, in terms of its reach and its regional economic role, it impacts on a much wider region, as I think, Prof is mentioning. So it's a really critical space for us to make sure, that we get governance and that in Gauteng right, and we able to, really put the conditions for fundamental change and transformation in Gauteng. I mean, you've got, like I say, a quarter of the population. But I think at a larger scale, government has not kind of, over the years, taken the issue of urbanization also seriously. So a province like Gauteng is, is underplanned from a perspective of building, integrated human settlements, integrating our settlement and transportation systems, really building a kind of, doing proper urban planning and ensuring that you're building inclusive, integrated developmental spaces. So Gauteng has got, I think, challenges again that goes beyond us saying we got to fix and get the basics right. And there's a lot we need to do in that regard. But the challenges go way beyond the basics. And I'm saying this is where we're talking of really transformative, courageous, visionary approaches, but also making sure we do things and get things right. Look, if we can get the basics right, I mean, even capital, we talk about capitalism, even capital wants the basics to work and function properly. Because if there's no basic service delivery, if your spaces, as the Premier is saying, are unsightly, I mean, basic upkeep of our neighborhoods and CBDs and, those sort of conditions are key because those things align. Good service delivery, basic service delivery is good for citizens, for communities, and it's good also for attracting investment and capital, right? But the issue is, how do you want to build, an inclusive kind of province and create opportunities for, for everyone in the province? I think those then become challenges. So the kind of approaches we want to see, for example, mention was made again of the township economies and looking at townships like Alexandra, right? Now, again, I think the typical approach is where we take this kind of status quo mentality and we almost frame the way we want to develop ourselves. We frame it within the apartheid constructs and mentalities, right? So all we want to do at Alexandra is just, tinker at the edges and just revitalize it and make it a better township, then I'm afraid that's not going to hold. Because if you find Alexandra is in the economic hub, right? With Sandton and that whole economic region. And I think we need to have a much more bolder vision of how we can transform that space. It could be a model for spatial transformation, overcoming apartheid spatial geography, etc. And Gauteng needs to lead with this. But I think, over the last 10, 20 years, Gauteng has lagged massively behind. If we look at the southern part of Gauteng, right? So a lot of the focus of investment, and you see when capital is unchecked, right? A lot of your development will flow to the northern parts of Gauteng, right? And the largest part of the Gauteng population resides in the south. And if you look at how is the state and government trying to cajole and mobilize and move that capital into the south, that's the kind of strategic developmental role we're saying, a developmental government, as Rasigan is saying. That's what you want to begin to see. And I think you can, we need to see how those kind of things get factored in and built in. So again, I say I live with hope that a government of national unity can begin to get molded in a way where we move out of just the status quo. We realize the things that have not worked, but we really work towards a much more transformative approach to how we want to do things. Thanks.
Yes, Tahir, I think what is going to be interesting, and Panyaza spoke about consolidating manifestos. Now, we're talking about parties like the ANC, the DA, IFP, RISE, and the PA that consists of the GPU. But we should not lose sight of the considerable support. And we're not only talking about Gauteng, we look at KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, where MK, 45% of the vote on a provincial level went to MK. So we cannot underestimate the EFF and MK in their roles in these as opposition. And this was a question that I asked you to look at it at a national level, but also indicative of what is likely to play out on a provincial level and how these parties would receive these governments, even on a provincial level.
Yeah, no, look, on face value and on paper, the announcement and the choice of the portfolios says exactly what Yusuf said. Because if you look at the choice of these portfolios and the way Panyaza tried to reason why they are going with these portfolios, he, in a way, spoke to exactly what Yusuf is saying. However, again, we've been hearing these kinds of things for many years. Because, if there's one thing about the African National Congress, when coming to policies and visions, they are very good at that. But the problem has always been implementation. For some reason, they are unable to put their dreams into reality. But there's few observations that I've picked up from this announcement. The one is that I counted about 3 portfolios that have been hidden underneath other portfolios. For instance, safety, which is one of the most important portfolios. He has taken that into his office. And there's 2 others that have been merged with other departments. So what I can deduct from there, clearly they are putting aside 3 MEC positions for somebody. So it means that there's still some discussions that are taking place, and we may see 3 MEC coming in when there's going to be some reshuffling. Because if you look at the previous portfolios, they've literally reduced the number of MECs in this 7th administration. So now that tells you a story. Either they are still putting them aside for the Democratic Alliance, or they are putting them aside for MK and EFF, because he has spoken about MK and EFF without mentioning them in his speech. That's one. The other issue that I think I need to commend Panyaza and his provincial executive committee is that they stood firm against the DA. I think they've showed more courage than our president and the rest of the ANC across the country. They never fell to this intimidation tactics and bullying of the DA. I think that is commendable, that they were able to stand firm against the Democratic Alliance. The other thing that is worrying me, which is, and this is happening across government is that there seems to be a lot of duplication of responsibilities. For instance, they are now bringing in the environmental what do you call MEC? I think is from Rise Mzansi, or yeah, I think it's Rise Mzansi. Now that in itself, it's a new portfolio that is meant to look at environment and to help the municipalities where they are failing. That is a problem for me. Because remember, the provincial government's role is different from that of a municipality. You don't create a new department in order to assist somebody from their failures who are entrusted constitutionally to do. The province, when a municipality is unable to fulfill its obligation, it's supposed to take over the administration and make sure that that work is done, but still it must be done by the municipality. Now they are developing a new portfolio that is going to help the Al Jama mayor if he fails to clean Johannesburg. It shouldn't work like that. The province must empower. They mustn't do the work of the municipalities. And Joburg is complicated, and I feel sorry for the current Joburg administration, because of, remember, Joburg has been deteriorating over a number of years, and they found a Joburg that is almost near collapse, and to try and resuscitate it with lack of resources and assistance is not going to happen. Instead of having a department, rather put money aside to assist them to be able to fulfill their mandate. But to create this duplication, and that's where the monies are stifled, that's where corruption will always raise its ugly head. Because of where there's duplication, we end up not knowing who's supposed to be doing what, and then all of a sudden, monies just evaporate into thin air. And for me, that is a problem. It's something that I believe that it was completely unnecessary. They've identified the problem. It's very clear what is happening. And it's not the Joburg CBD. If you go to Tshwane here, where we are staying, Tshwane is terrible. I promise you, Tshwane is not. You know, I mean, I grew up in Tshwane. I know how Tshwane used to be like. Even before they built this beautiful Tshwane house, when it was still Manitoria building, it was far much better than what it is now. Now, the question is that how do you then make sure that you optimize delivery and efficiency? You don't create another vehicle when you have a vehicle that is supposed, that is completely unacceptable, and it's one of the things that I believe they were not supposed to happen. The other thing that I picked up from his speech, in as much as he acknowledged the failures as a by the way. Remember, today it was just an announcement. The issue that for me is a problem, going to be a problematic issue, is this thing of consolidation of manifestos. Now, the manifestos of the political parties are decisions of political parties. Now, if you are saying you are going to consolidate, it means that you are going to take some and you are going to not take some. Now, the question, who decides what goes in and what doesn't? It may go a little bit quicker because the Democratic Alliance is not there. And then the Inkatha Freedom Party, Rise Mzansi, and the PA, they are just going to be cheerleaders there. They're not going to really have much. I think they are just glad that they got MEC positions. So it may go a little bit quicker in making sure that they revert to what the African National Congress has. Because African National Congress manifesto is a progressive manifesto that speaks to the plight of the poor. But like I said, with them, the problem has always been putting that into action and translating it into delivery.
Well, Tahir, it's like, gentlemen, I see we've got about 8 minutes. And perhaps just very quickly, we're just going to go around. I see there's a quick comment that says Panyaza Lesotho will not finish his terms as government of provincial unity will collapse unless Lesotho has made tender deals with EFF who will vote with him in return for tenders worth billions. Well, that's come through from Gulam. I'm so proud of Panyaza, but shame they are going to deal with him. I hope he's ready. That's from Caesar Lomo. But just to obviously, we need to now get towards the end of the broadcast. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes to go. Prof, just very quickly, looking at civil society, looking at activists, looking at people outside of governance, okay, against now that the provincial governments are in place, national governments in place. What should we be doing? What should we be focusing on?
So thanks very much, colleagues, and for the broader discussion as well. I think it's quite important now, having seen what's happened after 30 years into a transition itself. We learn the lessons. And out of that, we use the lessons to make a more accurate description of the problems that we are confronted by. In doing so, I really would encourage that we not be trapped inside the framework that we ourselves have created, including these things of what constitutes provinces, what constitutes local governments, and what constitutes our national government itself. We've seen the failure through this election of it trying to gain a mandate to operate. Let's use this opportunity to actually break out of the things that are not working for us and that are not serving us in advancing. Towards that end, I really want to encourage as well. The word hope has been raised, but for hope to have some validity, we need to be responding to things that are concrete, that we have actually, that we actually seek to redress. And really, we must get away from merely talking about this political parade of individuals as if they will solve our problems. The problems of South Africa are the problems for the peoples of South Africa to resolve. And if the structures don't serve those purposes, maybe the time has come for us to be mature enough to admit that and create structures that work. Thank you very much, Inayet, and the colleagues for the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yusuf, I know MUSA has got a few initiatives obviously coming up in terms of, from what I've heard, and I'm sure, a number of these issues will be discussed at MUSA level as well in terms of what is planned. How do you see the way forward?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we're looking at doing is, developing a barometer for transformative consciousness and transformative activism. And to look at, so included in that would be, how do we actually measure that our policies, our structures, so to speak, as Rasigan is saying, how do we measure that what we have in place will actually, or can actually result in a sort of developmental impacts that we want, right? So I think developing that sort of a barometer and beginning to get stakeholders and communities and civil society, mobilized around that, so that we have actual, because we also need to move beyond just criticizing. We need to begin to also develop tools and instruments that can assist and enable us to participate in this. And we want to continue. We've started a whole program of discussions with the faith-based sector, with young people, with the business sector. But it's discussions all about how can we begin to activate and move towards these sort of transformative approaches, so that we're starting to also, yes, we ensure that we're getting basics right. We need to have stability and etc. But we need to. It's not going to be enough for us to really deal with the massive challenges we faced as a country. So we're all going to need to come together, in all of this. And then I think maybe just the last one or 2 points. I think Tahir has mentioned this issue of government getting mixed up in, powers and functions between spheres in it. And I think that is an important thing that we need to look out for. But there have been initiatives like, to assist with coordination in government. So this is to begin to, again, it's about putting instruments and systems in place. And even if we want to learn from the Chinese, then there's a lot we can learn in this regard, so that you begin to have, even long-term strategic plans and processes which you can break down into medium-term and short-term and annual business plans, etc. But you have a coordination, and there is this district development model approach that has been developed in government to assist with this coordination and build it around focusing on these strategic regional spaces, the 52 district and metro spaces, from a development perspective, so that you also begin to get, away from these sort of tight, narrow mandates of sectors and spheres of government, and where provinces, sometimes provinces, you could argue they're just, it's just creating an administrative layer unnecessarily sometimes. But I think if we work towards these more outcome-based, impact-orientated systems, it could assist. So I'm hoping that even within the province and government as a whole continues and adopts and takes those sort of models further. And then I think just the last point from my side is, whatever this government of national unity, etc., is going to be about, I think we need to ensure that on the global front, the focus remains on global justice, global solidarity, because I think the issue of injustice, exploitation, oppression, these kind of unending wars and conflicts that we've been faced with, which is actually perpetuating this global system. And this is what this global system is about. But it's actually causing a lot of challenges for us here locally. So we can't de-link the global and local. We can't de-link the issues of, for instance, the genocide in Palestine from what is actually happening here, because these are actually the systems that are reproducing themselves, creating all of this instability, and using that to try and perpetuate their own interests. So I think on that vigilance, and from a civil society point of view, to make sure that government doesn't lose the take the eye off the ball in terms of those global struggles, we're going to need to make sure that that is the case. Thanks.
Well, shukran for that, Yusuf. Jazakallah for that. And we're going to go across to Thabiso. Thabiso, just final thoughts from you before we get to Tahir to close.
Okay, thank you. In 30 years ago, we had a GNU that was primarily based on reconciling South Africans. That was the premise of the previous GNU. And the present GNU, inverted commas, as Brother Yusuf Patel said something to the effect about coming together. I believe coming together should be based on sincerity and credibility. This coming together is not based on either. There's no credibility in it. There's no sincerity in it, considering the IEC's issues pertaining to elections. I mean, we all know about that. I don't want to repeat basically what has been said over and over again. And then I want to touch on the issue of capital, that capital needs to come through in helping the state to improve the lives of the people. So basically what the panel is saying is that perhaps capital will come because the Zionists are in power formally now, because previously the capital actually never cared. I mean, capital has been holding on to their money for quite a while. So are you saying that capital has been will only assist in developing this country because of the Zionists are here? It really raises questions for me. So it means that in essence, the ANC was never trusted 30 years ago. So meaning that the only trust is in because of their white people, they are Zionists inside government as we speak. So I really have a problem with that. And then pertaining to the Alexander Renewal Project, it is not the first time that we're speaking about the Alexander Renewal Project. In fact, the president lied about the housing that was supposed to take place, the promises that were made pertaining to Alexander. So as I said earlier on, all these glossy speeches are just there to me on a personal level. They're just glossy speeches, because previously nothing was done, especially with regards to Alexander and other townships for that matter. So, like I'm saying, the GNU that we have now, it is based on an elite group of people who are there to join the ANC in the feeding trough, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Thabiso. And yes, Tahir, final word from you.
Look, since we have created a couple of bourgeoisies that are going to cost us over $1 billion a year, now it becomes our responsibility as South Africans, as citizens, not to drop the ball. The problem with South Africans is that we are active when coming to elections and all that, and then we go into slumber for 5 years, and then after 5 years, we wonder why things haven't moved. I think we need to start understanding that we have responsibility within these 5 years. We should be glad that people are lying and are telling us all these things, because of whatever that they say, at least we have something to hold them accountable, and that is their word. But if we are not going to act and make sure that we hold them accountable, unfortunately, they will not be afraid of us. They will not be afraid to steal. They will not be afraid to go into slumber. They will not be afraid to overlook the plight of the poor, because all that we should care about, anything that doesn't translate in advancement of our social impact and improvement of the life of ordinary South Africans, we must reject it. It doesn't matter who we should be coming from. But as we speak now, we have this group of fat cats that are going to earn a lot of money at our expense. The least that we can do is to make sure that we hold them accountable. And this is the view that we've taken as the PSCU, that, for instance, as a trade union, we are not going to be adversarial in our approach. We have a motto or a slogan that says that we'll make every workplace better than the way we found it, meaning that we must be solution orientated instead of being adversarial, because being adversarial sometimes it's a reactive kind of an environment that you end up not achieving anything. But if we come with solutions and we are sincere, like what Thabiso is saying, in our approach, maybe they can then reciprocate with sincerity, and we can take this country forward for the sake of our people and the generations to come.
Well, Tahir, shukran for that as well. And to all the panelists tonight, Thabiso, Twala, Professor Rasigan, Maharaj, Phapano, Phasha, who unfortunately had to leave a bit earlier, Yusuf, Patel, and Tahir, Maepa, we thank all of you for your time with us on Salam Media on this panel discussion on this Wednesday evening. So all the best to all of you, and please take care.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Well, that brings us to the end of this very first edition of Wednesday Nights with myself, Inayet Wadee, since making a comeback after 2 months. And I must say, it's been most absorbing, and it's been wonderful being in the company of our listeners, our viewers on Salam Media, on the various platforms. And these are difficult times that we are going through as we navigate through this uncharted territory of a government of a national unity in this country. And time will tell whether this will work or it's not going to work. And like I said earlier on, there are many, many people that are concerned, but also many, many skeptics in terms of whether the GNU will survive the full 5-year term. Again, it requires a lot, and we heard from Panyaza Latufi talking about transparency, talking about compromise, talking about misunderstandings, talking about being in a boxing ring. And perhaps this is what we need to do, is sit at that ringside, get ringside tickets, and watch what unfolds in these boxing rings throughout the entire country. And with that, I'm going to leave you from myself and the team here at Salam Media. All the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.